There are 4 unique classes in Deep Rock Galactic with their own weapons, tools, and playstyles. There's the Driller, the Gunner, the Scout, and the Engineer, and you can play any class at any time. But picking the right starting class for you is the most important decision you'll have to make if you want to enjoy Deep Rock Galactic. I've tried to get a lot of friends to play Deep Rock before. The ones I recommended the wrong class to start with all instantly put the game down because they weren't having fun, and a couple of them even uninstalled and refunded the game, which is really sad because I think this is one of the best live service games that you can get. The game has so much fun, replayable content, and every update that adds even more to the game is completely free. You never feel like you're on a never-ending treadmill that only ends in you getting burnt out and exhausted. So it's really important for you to start with the right class because then you'll fall in love with this incredible indie game made by one of the best development teams out there. Let's start with the Gunner. The Gunner is a bit of a slow class where you sacrifice a little bit of movement for insane damage. Because of how powerful the Gunner's weapons are, the trade-off is that you have to juggle slower movement speed, which can be really tough for you to balance because the majority of enemies in Deep Rock Galactic are melee enemies, so you're constantly fighting for your life at close range. When things do start to become too overwhelming for you and you're being surrounded, the Gunner has a deployable shield that you can drop at your feet. The shield instantly hits every nearby enemy with the Fear status effect, which is one of the most powerful status effects in the entire game. Enemies will move away from the shield for a couple seconds and the personal shield on any player's health will recover almost instantly. This gives you and your team instant cover for those overwhelming situations. Gunner is going to be the best starting class for you if you vibe really hard with a couple things. You like using big, beefy weapons that feel powerful. You like being the protector, guardian, and the escort for your team. Or you care more about shooting and blasting enemies away rather than completing mission objectives. The Gunner has 3 different primary weapons for blasting enemies away. The minigun can be built for maximum single target damage, which is one of the best boss DPS options in the entire game. You can also build the minigun for wave clear where you're just shredding through dozens of bugs at the same time. The Gunner also has an autocannon and a guided rocket gun, which are both these beefy, chunky weapons that fire projectiles that deal splash damage on impact. Both of these weapons are typically built for wave clear rather than raw damage because you naturally hit multiple targets at the same time. They're some of the most fun weapons in the game for just racking up large kill counts, and in the right hands, a Gunner that's the last alive will save the team from failure. One of the best moments in Deep Rock Galactic is single-handedly slicing and opening through a horde of enemies to revive your down team because no dwarf is ever left behind. The main responsibility for the Gunner on the team is to kill bugs, which means it's a great class when you're playing with other people, whether that's in matchmaking or a team with your friends. But that also means that it's the weakest class solo because his kit just doesn't have enough ziplines to easily get to all of the mission objectives that you need to collect solo. But because the matchmaking in game is great and it's so much fun to kill as many bugs as possible, you will love playing Gunner. The next class is the Scout, which is what I recommend to anyone that's having trouble really getting into the game. You've tried a class or two and you're not understanding why this game has the outstanding reviews that it does. It can be tough to really become invested into Deep Rock Galactic until you play a class that's got a really fun kit where you feel like you're constantly getting dopamine hits from flying around faster than anyone else. If you're coming from fast-paced games where you're always running headfirst into combat, the Scout is the best starting class for you. The Scout is the fastest class in the game because it has a grappling hook that you can use to zip around faster than every other class. You're able to collect the mission objectives better than anyone else because those items are either impossible for other classes to get to or require so much time, effort, and resources for anyone else to get. What takes other classes a long time to get to, you can get to in seconds. This class is insanely fun and is tied with the Driller as my most played class in the game. Later on, you're going to get an overclock called Special Powder that shoots you backwards when you're in the air. Overclocks are a way to further customize your weapons, making them more unique from one person to the next. And this overclock is probably my favorite. Check out how I'm using the shotgun to shoot the ground at my feet and launch myself into the air. When you use the grapple and the shotgun together, you can completely avoid touching the ground, and you can even get so high above the map that it takes you forever to fall back down to the ground. This playstyle on the Scout is what anyone should try early on if the other classes just aren't really hooking you into Deep Rock Galactic. Sometimes you just need to start with something silly and fun while you learn to love everything else about Deep Rock Galactic. The Scout is the class for players that want to support their team with flares that light up the darkness. Scout is for players that want to be responsible for the mission's success or failure, because taking too long to complete the mission objectives means everyone gets overrun by bugs. The Scout is tied for my favorite class in the game because of how addicting the Scout's kit and movement are to play. Time just disappears, and I think it's a great class for you to start with. The next class is the Engineer, and it's one of the most popular classes in Deep Rock Galactic. This class is the king of locking down and defending a zone with traps and sentry turrets. A good Engineer player can fortify an area so well that wave after wave of enemies dive before they even get close enough to do any damage to your team. You'll fall in love with the Engineer if you like to think and plan ahead how you engage in battle, like placing foam platforms that block paths the bugs can take, so they're only left with one area to flow through. Once you've made a predictable path the bugs have to take, they're like bugs in a barrel. The proximity grenades you place in the path they have to take will explode when they get near. Your sentry turret you place facing that direction will rain bullets before they get close, and you still have your primary and secondary weapons to shoot at anything still standing. But there's also a lot of fun that you can have with the class if you're not a planner. With the Fat Boy overclock on the Deep Rock grenade launcher, you can lob grenades that are like miniature nuclear warheads. They cause massive explosions which are large enough to kill pretty much everything that's grouped up together, but it also leaves a radiation circle that does damage over time to anyone inside the area of effect. Be careful with this though, because you can very easily team kill another player or burn a ton of their health with the radiation AoE. Just be a good team player and don't shoot fat boys near your team. This class hands down is the most rewarding class in the game for players that understand most of the enemies you fight will funnel to you predictably. You can abuse their weaknesses with your expertise, which can make the difference between success or your team be entirely surrounded by bugs. Surrounded so heavily that it means defeat. I think a lot of you will love the Engineer class, but don't forget to shoot platforms underneath mission objectives and minerals that are in hard to reach places so your scout player can safely grapple to them. The last class is the Driller, and it's my personal favorite class because in the right hands, you can do everything. This class is for players that want to wield weapons that do huge cleave damage that hit tons of enemies at the same time. The Driller has 3 primary weapons that are also special in crowd control. You start with a flamethrower, which, yes, it turns enemies into ash with the direct flame, but its real strength is how it slows enemies down when they step into the sticky flames on the ground. This causes bugs to burn for even longer since they stand in the fire for more time, but most importantly, it keeps the melee enemies away from hitting you, and when you start playing on harder and harder difficulties, this becomes extremely important because of how much faster enemies get and how much more damage they do to you. But if watching the world burn isn't your playstyle, you can freeze and completely immobilize any enemy with the cryo cannon. The cryo cannon is such a powerful weapon because freeze is the strongest status effect in Deep Rock Galactic. When an enemy is frozen, they cannot move, they cannot attack, they cannot do anything until they thaw out. While they're frozen, they take an additional 300% damage from all kinetic sources like every dwarf's pickaxe or the driller's throwing axes and drills. Every weapon also does more damage to frozen enemies because the natural body armor on each bug that softens your damage a bit is completely ignored. Oh, and a lot of enemies in the game will just instantly die when they're frozen. So with the cryo cannon, you can instantly apply an overpowered status effect to every bug in your general area. This frozen status effect will instantly kill any enemy that flies or any of the little ankle biters you see all the time. The cryo cannon also makes any enemy take more damage from other weapons, especially kinetic weapons. The cryo cannon is great and you'll have so much fun using it as a weapon that's just trying to freeze as many enemies as quickly as possible. Then you finish them off with the rest of your kit or your team takes care of them. The last primary weapon is a sludge pump that massively slows enemies trapped in the goo projectiles that you shoot and does damage over time while they're stuck in it. In my opinion, it falls in between the flamethrower and the cryo cannon, both being good at crowd control and damage over time that kills bugs. The flamethrower's crowd control specializes in slowing and killing, the cryo cannon's crowd control specializes in slowing and immobilizing, and the sludge pump is in the middle, both killing and immobilizing with a ton of slow effects. The Driller is a class that you will love if you like heart-pumping combat where it's you against an army of bugs and you're armed with big weapons that take care of dozens of bugs at the same time. With your drills, you can reach any mission objective, which makes the Driller the best class for solo players in my opinion. This class is awesome. No one class is the best, they all have their unique strengths, weaknesses, and kits that come together to make one of the best team co-op games that I've ever played. If you like shooting more bugs than anyone else you play with and doing your job with big weapons with big damage, the Gunner is the best starting class for you. If you like to plan and strategize how you fight a little bit, using the tools and trap in your arsenal to destroy any and all bugs before they get close to your team, the best starting class for you is the Engineer. If you're like me and you love slaying a bunch of enemies at the same time and being the best class in close range, the best starting class for you is the Driller with his weapons that are great at wave clear and crowd control and mobilization. And if you don't really vibe with any other class, you haven't fallen in love with Deep Rock Galactic yet, or you want to play the class that leads your team into the unknown, the best starting class for you is a Scout. Make sure to like this video so more people know what's the best starting class for them, and subscribe to the channel for the best weapon builds in the game. Thanks for watching.